Is your cloud bill out of control? Cloud Zero is building a platform that will let you analyze your cloud investment faster than ever before. You'll get accurate, granular visibility into your total cloud spend without the typical pitfalls of legacy cloud cost management tools like endless tagging or clunky Kubernetes support. Cloud Zero is how cloud-driven companies gain more financial control and predictability by driving immediate and ongoing savings. You can answer questions like, how can I save 20% of my cloud bill right now? Who are my most expensive customers? How much does this specific feature cost our business? Join companies like Rapid7, Drift, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started today. Again, please visit cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started today.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. September of 2023. Yeah, that is upon us. Another Sunday Perspectives. Hope everybody is doing well. Weather is starting to cool off just a bit. It was chilly this morning when I took the dog out, who I know many of you like to mention. You'll hear the dog bark from time to time. There will be no dog barks today, but took the dog out this morning. It was a little bit chilly. Felt like maybe we might need like a sweatshirt or a hoodie or something to sort of knock the chill off. So we are getting into the fall part of the season, fall part of the year, at least for those of us up here in the Northern Hemisphere. Hope everybody's doing good. This weekend, at least here in the United States, is actually one of the better weekends of the year. It is a long weekend, what we consider like a 3-day weekend or a 3.5-day weekend, depending on when you cut out work. It is what we call Labor Day weekend. So it's the weekend in which we celebrate the effort of labor, the people that are putting in work, the common man, the common woman who is doing work. And I thought today what I would do for Sunday Perspective is kind of connect the dots on a couple of things that are obviously been getting a lot of press lately, but when we really look at them, are all about labor. And that is both the new push, especially from high tech companies, but I think we're seeing it from companies, in all sorts of industries, about returning to work now that the pandemic is under control or hopefully sort of subsided or gone, wherever it is in your part of the world. But essentially businesses, large and small, especially the tech companies, are urging, cajoling, demanding that people come back to work. And the other thing is kind of the labor aspect of AI, of artificial intelligence, which, we've said we're trying not to make every show about AI, but it feels like every discussion point, everything going on in the news has some AI angle to it. And I think the one that we haven't really talked about a whole lot is kind of the labor angle to it. So what I'd kind of like to do after the break, as we come up to Labor Day weekend, celebrate labor, is really kind of talk about both the location of where we will be doing labor and how much our labor will be our own labor, an augmented capability of that, or some sort of replacement or deprecation of labor. So we're going to dive into that and the through lines between those right after the break. Datadog is a SaaS cloud monitoring and security platform that enables full-stack observability for modern infrastructure and applications at any scale, providing teams dashboarding, alerting, application performance monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, UX monitoring, security monitoring, and log management in one tightly integrated platform, plus 450 plus out-of-the-box integrations with technologies including cloud providers, databases, and web servers. Aggregate all your data into one platform for seamless correlation, enabling teams to troubleshoot and collaborate together in one place, preventing downtime and enhancing performance and reliability. Get started with a free 14-day trial by visiting datadog.com/cloudcast. That's datadog.com/cloudcast.
This episode is supported by the AWS Insiders podcast. AWS Insiders is a fast-paced, entertaining, and insightful look behind the scenes of AWS and cloud computing. I'm a subscriber to AWS Insiders, and I love Rahul and Hillary's practical analysis and interviews. As an F1 racing fan, the recent episode on how AWS and F1 partnered together to make the races more exciting was especially entertaining. Search for AWS Insiders in your podcast player. We'll also include a link in the show notes. My thanks to AWS Insiders for their support.
And we're back. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're gonna we're going to talk a little bit about labor on this Labor Day weekend, at least here in the United States. For those of you not in the States, if you interact with the States, most of your colleagues and coworkers will not be working on Monday because of Labor Day. So, a lot of this sort of boils down to maybe what seems like two very basic but very fundamental questions, which is number one, if you have not been going into the office for the last, let's call it 2 years, 3 years, depending on, what your company policy has been, should you go back to the office? Is that advantageous to you? Is that good for you? Is that good for your business? Is that good for the work that you do? Is it good for your career? And the second one has to do more with sort of augmentation of work, which is how AI is often positioned, although you'll notice that most of the time, the people that are building AI, that are pushing AI, that are hyping AI, love to say that AI is nowhere close to replacing jobs. But yet, I think if we're all somewhat honest with ourselves, AI is very much going to be pushed in a lot of cases as a either people augmenter or people somewhat replacer. And I think it's important to start wrapping your head around, what is AI going to mean for your line of work, for the type of work that you do, whether you are in the tech field or you're talking to friends, relatives, cousins, neighbors, colleagues, somebody at church or in your, at your gym or something. What's it going to mean to them? Let's take a look and let's dig into sort of those two fundamental questions, especially around labor. So first and foremost, the back to work thing. So let's get sort of the elephant in the room off the table. Why now, after a couple of years, are businesses asking people to come back to work? There's the sort of pro side of it. The sort of positive side of it is obviously, you could argue, and I think Zoom came out and sort of had some stuff that was leaked, that even Zoom, the company who allowed so many people to work remotely, although obviously there are lots of other video conferencing services, but the company who sort of was at the center of enabling people to work remotely or families to connect remotely or whatever capability during the pandemic, is essentially telling their workers, I need you to come back. And I need you to come back specifically because we have a lot of innovation, a lot of new things that have to get done, not sort of mundane, repetitive stuff, not, status meetings and stand-ups and stuff. But we have a whole bunch of innovation that needs to get done in order for the business to be successful. And, we need you to come back into the office. And, that's in essence, something that probably most of us would have argued if you've been in the office, if you're young and you've never really been in the office, or you're somebody who has worked remote, your whole career, for those who have been into the office, you could make probably a pretty valid argument, although, finding exactly the data is, probably can be argued. But when you're around people, a close proximity to people, the ability to stop by their office, to have impromptu meetings, to have planned meetings, to have whiteboards readily available, and not have to worry about, who can see stuff and can you see my slides and can you hear me and how does my background look? And, people are, being colleagues, being collaborative, being innovative together. It tends to, on the whole, not in every situation, it tends to probably produce better outputs. Yes, there are examples of fully remote companies, and yes, there are examples of projects that have, happened, between remote teams and disparate teams. But by and large, if you look at the sort of, center of gravity of innovation, of new things happening, of new ideas being communicated and propagated, they tend to happen when people are in close physical proximity to each other. There's just kind of undeniably something about that. So that's at the core of businesses asking people to come back, is they're looking around at their markets, they're looking at their differentiation, they're looking at where they stand, and they say, look, we're paying people a lot of money. In our opinion, we're not getting as much value out of them as we could if they were in closer proximity and they were doing more innovation. So that's sort of the pro side of the argument, right? Collaboration, team building, innovation. The other side of it that people don't want to talk about as much, but is a reality, is that, businesses made huge investments over time, recently and over time, in buildings, in facilities, and they are paying for those costs, whether they're being used. So whether it's rent or electricity or air conditioning or taxes or other things, and they would like to get efficiency out of what they do, right? They don't really want to be paying for your home internet. They don't want to be paying for, your fancy desk chair. They don't want to be doing that when there's not a lot of sort of economies of scale in doing that, right? The other thing is, there's a distinct concern about how much you're working or how efficient you are. And again, on an individual basis, people can argue like I'm working more hours than I did before. I'm more efficient than I was before because I'm not wasting time commuting. I'm not wasting time having to drop my kids off at daycare and other things. So there's definitely both sort of pros, pro management, pro employee, pro collaboration, pro efficiency of business. And there's some things that people would argue like, oh, well, that's not really my problem. That's the business's problem. The other side of working from home is obviously it unlocked some freedom, I guess, for, I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but some enablement for people who have some challenges that maybe not everybody thinks of. So if you are a woman in the workforce and you have children, maybe you are the sort of the primary caregiver for children. You've not having to, leave the office at a certain time, being able to, get the kids off to school, get them fed properly, get them clothed properly, maybe get them to daycare if that's what you need to do, be able to, interact with their teachers, as opposed to just like once a quarter at, parent teacher day, you can do it on a more regular basis. And that's not entirely just a sort of a female point of view, but, in the case of female workers, having burdens that typically are put upon them more so than male workers, it's probably been more of a boon, right? It's been more flexible. Obviously there's other parts of, paid leave and paid daycare and all sorts of stuff that can become a perk, but, that working from home has not been entirely a downside for a lot of people and not just sort of one group of people, but, certain specific groups of people who have, had other challenges that maybe their male coworkers didn't necessarily have. So it's not by any means an easy answer. It's not by any means an easy fix. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind because it's not totally clear at this point between management and labor, because that's how most kind of ways of looking at this get broken down. They don't get looked at on an individual basis, but they get looked at as sort of what's in the best interest of management to help run the business and make numbers, and what's in the best interest of labor to be able to, collectively, get enough value out of management in the business. And it's not clear which one necessarily has leverage, right? We're starting to see, it feels like at this point, labor still has more leverage because we have not yet seen sort of any company, at least in tech, be able to have sort of a full crackdown. We are seeing, whether they are leaked or whether they're purposely put out into the press, articles about HR and management groups being like, please come back in. We will bribe you to come back in. We'll pay you $10 a day. We'll make donations to your charities. We will figure out a way to somehow cover your commuting or your parking or some other, there's a lot of that. There's, Amazon essentially starting to sort of threaten people that, hey, your job may not be available to you. And that's a perfectly valid thing, especially if, the culture of the company, as in somebody like Amazon, but this could mean anybody, was built around, kind of locality and collaboration and closeness and so forth. So we're definitely seeing more and more frustration out of management. We're seeing much more kind of push and cajoling to get people to try and come in without trying to look too heavy-handed or trying to be too much of sort of a bully in this. But I think, both sides have some pretty valid, claims and criticisms as to, whether or not they are doing it. Now, one thing I will kind of give some advice, and again, this is advice. You can take it for what it's worth. It's a lot of what we do on the Sunday Perspective is advice. There is, if you do decide to to go into the office. What are the benefits of going into the office? 'Cause a lot of times people will say, well, gosh, I got to get dressed up. I got to shower at a certain time. I got to be there at a certain time. I have commuting costs. I have commuting time and mental health that I could be going to the gym and working out. But what are the benefits of going to the office, right? Beyond just, hey, maybe my team could be more collaborative. From a personal perspective, the first thing is you're typically going to see your management teams trying to set an example, or be a kind of a guiding light to go into the office first, right? They're going to be sort of say, well, if we need to show the company what this new looks like, we're going to be in there. So if you are in the office, the first and foremost thing you get is proximity to power. You are going to be nearer to the management chain, meaning they can see you, they can talk to you, they can run into you in the hallway, they could have lunch with you, they could be talking to you in the parking lot, that you aren't going to get being on the other end of a Zoom call or a Teams call or whatever, or the other end of a Slack channel, right? There's a certain thing about proximity to power that is valuable to an individual, right? The second thing is, there's an opportunity to do more collaboration, impromptu collaboration, or the kind of collaboration that just sort of works better when you are face-to-face with people, right? The stuff where things are emotional, where maybe there's a lot of nuance in the argument you're trying to make. Maybe there's things that need to just be visualized that are easier done with a whiteboard than trying to make slides. The sort of impromptu-ness, the give and take that happens in negotiations, all those things, for the most part, tend to happen better face-to-face. And so whether or not you think that's important to you, if you do choose to go into the office, you are going to sort of get that benefit. And the third one is just pure visibility, right? There are certain things, if you've been around the workforce long enough, that, not being visible, right? It's one thing to be like, well, I jump onto email aliases a lot and I'm on Slack and I'm always sort of, my pager's always on. But just people seeing you and remembering your name, remembering your face, being like, yes, I remember when Mike or Sally or whoever spoke up in that meeting. They made a compelling argument. They caught my attention that people don't necessarily get out of a Zoom call or whatever, because let's be honest, if you do enough hours of Zoom, you tend to be distracted for a good portion of it. You're checking other things. You're checking email. You're checking out a website. You're watching a video. You're doing whatever. You're multitasking. Harder to do when you're sitting in the same room with somebody, when you're in the same hallway with somebody talking to them and so forth. So if you do decide to go into the office or you are forced back into the office, take advantage of it, because you will find that a good number of your colleagues may or may not do that. And they may or not, it's been several years. They may have sort of forgotten what benefits, at least at an individual level, you potentially can create for yourself, or advantages you can create for yourself by being in the office. So again, take that for what it's worth. I'm somebody who's both been in the office every single day for years on end, and then have been remote work for years on end. And there are distinct trade-offs between them. There are distinct trade-offs with being in the wrong time zone, being in a different time zone than the majority of people you work with. There are distinct trade-offs from if people go back into the office and you continue to remain remote, about sort of hoping to be an equal at the other end of an internet connection as opposed to being an equal in the same room to them. So, we'll see how the dynamics play out over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. But that feels like the first of the real levers around labor that are going to get pushed and pulled here over the next few quarters and months and years. The other one I think is going to be more interesting and more nuanced and more complicated, and that is what is the interaction between AI and labor going to be? And again, depending on who you talk to, most of the use cases around AI, especially around sort of generative AI and the things that we see are, boy, what does this replace, right? So you could be looking at ChatGPT, or you can be looking at domain-specific large language models. And oftentimes the first thing that comes up is like, oh, well, this thing seems to be really smart at coding. This thing seems to be able to answer a lot of the questions I ask my accountant. This seems to, have some rudimentary knowledge of the law. And so you start seeing people having conversations of this is going to go out and target accountants. It's going to target lawyers. It's going to target developers. It's going to target, all sorts of things, teachers and other people who, language is at the center of what they do, or interacting and making decisions and building stuff, marketers and all those sort of things. So that's a conversation that we've all seen. We've all looked at it from different perspectives. Leaders on either side of the table around AI are kind of trying to, have the best of both worlds. They're trying to say, this is amazing, groundbreaking technology, but at the same time, they're very hesitant to say like, oh yes, we expect this to replace jobs. Now, keep in mind, if a lot of these capabilities are around productivity, right? Can we, do more with less? Can we do more with a lot less? Can we do things 3 times as fast, 10 times as fast? Are we going to be more accurate? We're going to walk a fine line between should the tool, the system, replace the people that are today the experts or doing that work, or should it augment them? And I think the answer for a while is going to be, it's going to augment them as opposed to directly replace them. Although we're beginning to see some use cases where that's the case, but more so it's augmentation for tedious work. It's becoming a little more kind of creative work or analytical work. So I think the real question to start asking yourself in that case is like, well, what is AI potentially going to do to my job? Right? We're already seeing that in things like the Hollywood labor strike with the writers and the creatives, really trying to push back against movie studios and music labels saying, hey, we can't have you using AI to basically do what I did, right? And we're seeing that play out in very, very high stakes strikes and labor negotiations and so forth. But we're also hearing stories about, hey, there is a task that is kind of repetitive. It is, going to the courthouse every day to look at, something that gets posted by a regulatory agency. Maybe it's the Energy Commission, or maybe it's, the latest updates for, houses that are available for auction or something along those lines. And those are the kind of jobs that, can begin to be automated, can begin to deal with sort of an overwhelming amount of work to do, but feels like maybe it's not the highest value work, but it's valuable. It's sort of foundational to higher value work being done. And so when you start to ask yourself, like, how should I think about this? There's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell you, don't worry about it. It's just new. We've always had new technology come along. This is just the next thing. And, as with anything, you should be somewhat skeptical of that. What's their motivation? Follow the money. What do they get out of doing this? Are they going to make more money if there's as many people involved, but just AI augments it? Are they going to make more money if less people are involved? So you want to start thinking that way. I think the second thing you want to do is you want to try and get ahead of your own destiny, get ahead of your own situation. So, don't wait for your boss or your management team to start looking to augment what you do or replace what you do with AI. Go out and do that yourself. Go out and figure out what is the state of the art in our space. Who are the companies that are targeting your specific vertical, your specific job with AI-based technologies, and what are they doing? What do they deliver? Can you take advantage of that, right? Can you look at your backlog of work and go, boy, I have a job that pays me for 40 hours a week. I'm doing like 50 or 60 hours every week. I would love to have some way to augment that. And if I can do that, then my work looks better. The boss doesn't necessarily need to know that I augmented it in some way, or our team augmented it in some way. And, possibly by getting that stuff done in 40 hours a week as opposed to 60 hours a week, you may find that you're both mentally in a better position to be, emotionally in a better position to be, but the business is in a better position to be as well. So, I think as with a lot of things we've seen in the past, when new stuff comes, especially stuff that is, you're unsure of what the future of that looks like, oftentimes the best thing to do, as opposed to fighting it and pushing back on it and looking for all the flaws in it, is to lean into it. And maybe you're doing it in your spare time. Maybe you're doing it, during work, is figure out how do I try and take advantage of this? And maybe you're going to start doing it as an individual. It's going to help you. It's going to help, your group look good. And then at a later point in time, once you have a good grasp of it, start looking at, how do we implement this? How do we expand it if it makes sense within your job role, within your function, within your business? Because the reality is, at some point, whether the economy is up or down, people are going to be pushing on your management team, on your boss, on your competitors to grow revenue, to be more profitable, meaning grow revenue and reduce cost, do it faster, compete better, have a greater, defensible moat of what you do. And they're going to be looking at things that can claim to augment, to do better, to reduce costs, reduce time, potentially reduce people. And so I think the biggest thing from a labor perspective is start with yourself, be a little bit selfish, if you will, be a little bit, introverted in your perspective on, what's best for you first, but become an expert in this stuff. Become an expert in what do outside people see of your role? Where do they see inefficiencies that maybe you don't even see? And what are they targeting? Because if they're targeting those things, you either may look at them and be like, okay, I know they're not going to succeed in that because I'm excellent at that. Or you might say, yeah, that is a distinct area that could be, problematic. So I think that's, to me, the biggest thing. I think the second thing is going to be very interesting to watch. And this is where you have to listen very hard and you have to read between the lines, which is as some of these new technologies come out and case studies start to happen and ROI models start to come out and other things, how are they being talked about? What's the wording that's being used to talk about the success or failure of these things, right? And we see this, kind of in the political sphere. Sometimes and again, this isn't trying to make a political argument, but we see this oftentimes in the political discussion where people are trying to get you to go down a certain path, and they actually use wording or phrasing that seems like it's in the complete opposite direction, right? In order to maybe distract you from the thing that's right in front of you and could scare you or make you fearful. So they're oftentimes going to use deception. They're going to use misleading. They're going to try and point you in a different direction than maybe what it is. So I think that's going to be the other thing that we're going to be keeping an eye on is how are successful AI projects presented? How are they positioned? How are they messaged? And how are unsuccessful ones? And, where are people being very direct about how AI is going to impact labor, and how are they being either indirect or sort of deceptive in what they mean versus what they deliver, or what they mean versus what they're trying to get management to do, right? And so this is one of these situations in which, you have to be paying attention to both what's happening in the labor side of it, but also on the management side of it. So anyways, just a couple of thoughts there around labor-related things here around Labor Day. This one will be going out on Sunday. Labor Day is on a Monday. Tried not to make this too long because I know on Labor Day you're trying to enjoy the weekend, whether you're watching football or having cookouts or spending time with friends and family or just enjoying the weather being a little more bearable. The summer is beginning to end. The days are getting a little shorter. The sun's a little less hot. So anyways, hope everybody's doing well. If you are in the path of any of the hurricanes or the earthquakes this last week, hope you're staying safe. So with that, we are, and those of us in North Carolina, we're going to be experiencing this here sooner than later. Unfortunately, it's just that time of year, what always happens to us. So anyways, with that, I want to wrap it up. I want to thank you all. Hope you enjoy the long holiday as you're listening to this. Hope you are figuring out your role in labor or in management and how you're going to position things. But thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend, helping us grow the show, helping us expand the reach of the show, giving us feedback. Remember, show@thecloudcast.net is the way to give us feedback. But thanks to everybody for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.